Hello and welcome back to the Why We Write Fantasy podcast. My name is Oscar Ceceña and I'm joined by my amazing co-host KJ.
Hello, welcome back. I'm so excited to be here yet again for another week of shenanigans.
Of course it is. So today we're talking about two books. We're going to go deep dive two books. Each one of us picked one, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. But before we go there, we want to talk, as always, about the books that we're reading right now. So, KJ, what are you reading today?
Yeah, so I'm not reading fantasy at all right now. I also really, really love nonfiction books. Investigative journalism happens to be one of the things that I absolutely love. So this is Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow. And this is actually, he was the journalist who put together all of the investigative information about Harvey Weinstein. And he finally compiled it into a book. It's phenomenal. It's like, yeah, I'm in awe because I love investigative journalism and the amount of work that goes into it. I know how hard he worked.
Yeah,
Having done just a tiny bit of it myself, I'm just in awe of it. So it's a really great read. I'm about halfway through, and that's what I'm reading right now. How about you, Oscar?
awesome. I'm reading the second book of the First Law trilogy. It's called Before They're Hanged by Joe Abercrombie. I just discovered Joe Abercrombie because someone recommended to me the first one of the First Law, The Blade itself, and I just loved it. It's like grim dark fantasy. It's the characters are really well developed. It shows like they're morally gray, that no one is really good or not even bad. Like it's just like humans, and I love the way the author deals with it. It's just an amazing read. I'm like, I would say a third of the second book, so hopefully in like by the end of the week I'm going to be done. Hopefully, but I don't
You
know.
probably will. You're a fast reader. Oscar's so much faster at reading than I am. I get really distracted. But I've heard really good things about that series as well. So, and Grimdark, yeah. So
Yeah,
cool. I might have to pick it up.
yeah, it is. It's actually like I love like grimdark fantasy, like Game of Thrones style type of things,
Yeah.
and this one is as good as that one, if not better in some cases. So
Nice.
it's a really good one. Like I would totally recommend it.
Welcome to the Why We Write Fantasy podcast, a podcast about all the reasons why we love to write and read fantasy.
So before we go into the deep dive that we each one of us picked one book, I'm just gonna ask everybody to, if you're liking this, go ahead and subscribe and like the video. And if you're listening as a podcast, subscribe to the podcast so you get the downloads every time that we launch a new one. We do this every Tuesday. So
Yes.
just be prepared and wait for us.
Yes. Follow us. Yay.
Yes. Okay, so let's start with yours, KJ. I think it's a
Alrighty.
really good one. So, which book did you pick? Why, and why it makes you a better writer?
Yeah, I'm so excited for this one. So I chose A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness. This happens to be, yes, and
I have
Oscar
my
got
copy
himself
here.
a copy too. I'm just like, okay, so a little sidebar here. When a friend actually reads your recommendation, your book recommendation, and then they end up loving it, it feels like you've arrived, you've arrived as a reader. So I feel like this is my moment. Um, so this book is actually it's a middle grade book. It's super fast read, like 2 hour power read. Make sure that you have your tissues because it's something. It's just so heart wrenching and so truthful. So this book, written by Patrick Ness, he wrote it based on an idea that Siobhan Dowd had, and I actually don't know who Siobhan Dowd is. So, but she was a writer and who passed away before she actually could write the story. So then he took the idea in her honor and wrote the book.
Mm,
And the story is about a little boy named Connor O'Malley, and Connor is 11 years old. He lives with his mom. She is a single parent, and she's dying of cancer. So, and it's about Connor's huge feelings around the process of her dying. Like even talking about it, I'm feeling a little choked up.
yeah, yeah. It's a
It's
very
so good.
emotional book. So
It's such an
yeah.
emotional book, and tackling death and grief and guilt, all of these huge emotions that Connor is feeling, tackling these in a middle grade book takes finesse. And I do think that Patrick Ness nailed it here. So, really quick, Connor is he's a really angry, sullen little boy. His father lives in America, so he feels abandoned by his father. His mother, who is an absolute sweetheart, it seems like she is dying of cancer, and his grandmother, who is his mom's mom, is there constantly trying to help out. But she and Connor butt heads a lot.
Hmm.
Um, so with this behavior, Connor is then, I think it's 12:07 p.m. or a.m., sorry, he is visited by a monster yew tree, this giant yew tree that comes to life. And the yew tree says, "I'm going to tell you three stories, and upon my fourth visit, you have to tell me your story. And the story will be of truth." And then Connor says, "But what truth?" And the yew tree says, "Your truth." So basically, the story is about the yew tree monster giving Connor this space, an imaginary realm, because these are what the stories are. They're an imaginary realm that Connor can expand into these huge feelings that he's feeling and learn to unpack them, to understand them, to name them, and then to finally let them go. And the feelings that he has, it's he 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 can't take watching his mother pass away anymore. He wants it to be over. And it's such like, oh, it's such a huge feeling. Even as an adult, it's not something that so many of us would be able to articulate.
Yeah.
And being able to write this in a middle grade novel is just like, it's absolutely phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. So, one of the reasons why I chose this book is because it actually helped me become a better writer. Being able to use the fantastical and the monsters, as a monster calls, to be able to illustrate these emotions that are often neglected, they're pushed aside, they're considered monstrous in themselves.
I read this book. I've never heard about it until, of course, you recommended it to me. But I think one of the things I loved was like you said, like this monster, like the
Mhm.
idea of this monster existing in Connor's mind.
Yes.
Um, but I don't know, like it feels so real
Mhm.
that at some point I was actually doubting myself, like, okay, so is this monster real or not? Like I actually love that, and I usually don't read like children's book that often, so I'm so glad I did this one because
Yeah.
I mean some people were criticizing it because like too predictable because you know what's going to happen in the end,
It's
but
middle grade. It's supposed to be predictable. Middle grade
that's the
kids are to
thing.
read
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Let's not read it through an adult lens here.
even if it's like even if you're reading it through an adult lens, like I think the journey is what, like the journey of reading, like enjoying the craft of the writing, it's what is worth it. Like
Yeah.
I mean, again, like I will always go back to Lord of the Rings. I don't know why.
It's okay. Be
um
forgiven.
but what I was going to say, like everybody knows by now
Yeah.
that how it ends. People now are still going to read it even if they know the ending, so because you
Yeah.
want to enjoy the whole thing. And I think this is what happens with this book. Like even since chapter one, you know how it's going to end. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference in the story. You're not there to see how it's going to end. You're there to see how Connor's character develops and evolves through the course of the book.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one scene in the book, going back to what you said there, that you're not entirely sure, is the monster real or is it a figment of Connor's imagination? Um, I think it's both, to be honest. And that's one of the themes in the book is parallel truths. Two things that seem to be in opposition to each other can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
So when it comes to Connor's emotions, he can feel both grief and sadness about his mom passing away, but also want her to go because it's too much for him. Those can
Mhm.
both live together. And that's the point of the story. But also, when you were saying that, I was thinking of the scene. Connor, he's at school, he's invisible, he's angry, he's sullen, and he finally he snaps. He loses it on this kid. And he comes running at this kid. I think they were in the cafeteria, and
Yeah.
it's like he becomes the yew tree monster. The monster is actually goading him into into snapping, because that's actually what Connor needs to do, is to let go.
Hmm.
Whether I mean, probably not beating up another kid is a good idea, but It's also learning that these things are okay, and that if Connor does have a safe space to feel these big emotions, that maybe us, as grown-ups can learn that as well, and that this is something we need, because if we don't get there, it becomes a
Yeah,
monster,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, and I think that's being able to use all of those techniques, those literary techniques in this middle grade novel that is what, like 50, 60,000 words, is phenomenal. And I
It
think that
is.
there's a reason why I love it, why you love it, and why so many kids love it as well, is because it's translatable, it's relatable, it's yeah, I can't say enough about it. It's 5 stars. It shook my
It's a
world.
5 stars. Yeah, yeah. I gave it
Like,
5 stars as well. But you know what? There's something I'm going to disagree with you. Like
oh
the,
no.
yeah, like the cafeteria scene when he beats up the bully. I just loved it. It's
Mm.
like, yeah,
Oh, I love
yeah.
it too. I love it too, but
And they
still,
say like they
probably
broke his arm or something. Like,
I
yeah,
know. Yeah, I know, but, like, assault, let's not
yeah, yeah.
let's try
I
not
know.
to
I mean,
encourage
yeah.
that.
That's what I
But
don't have kids. Like, imagine.
yeah, I love it. I feel like
But
you're really feeling
yeah,
a lot about yourself right now.
but but I did love what you said about the like. It's okay. Like it's okay to
Yeah,
snap. Like it's
yeah.
you cannot expect, especially a kid that is going through so
Oh
many things.
god.
Just stay calm and take everything that these bullies are putting on him. So
Yeah,
I think it's a good learning. Also, I mean, ideally we don't get to that point, right? Like
yeah.
in life or in as a kid or as an adult. But if it
That's true.
happens, it's
Yeah.
not a big deal, right?
Yeah, it shouldn't be a big deal. And, when I was writing about this book and I was doing other research around it as well, I was talking about monsters in my book and how using monstrousness and, this idea, the trope of monsters and how they're created through fantasy and horror as well, how it can actually help us understand ourselves.
Mm,
Right. So for me, and you say you found the ending predictable, I actually didn't find it predictable.
mm.
I was surprised when I was gonna call him Oscar. What Oscar's his
Oscar
name's
is me.
Connor.
I'm
Oscar's
Oscar.
here. That's Oscar, nice to meet you. When Connor actually said, "I just want it to be over," I think that actually just shook me. It took me by surprise because I didn't think that the writer would actually go there. But that is the place that we needed to go to. That's the place that Connor needed to go to, and the reader. So, this is one of the reasons why I love fantasy so much, because you have so many tools at your disposal to be able to tell really, really tough stories, like a
Yeah,
little kid who's watching his mom die. It's
yeah.
just,
It's
oh God,
heartbreaking. It's
I
heartbreaking.
just want to hug him so much. Oh, Connor. Yeah, so that's my choice. I'm every time I read a book about monsters, or I, watch film or TV, or, play our D&D nights, I always think about, okay, how can we utilize monsters better? What are these monsters trying to tell us now? Very meta,
Right.
right? But now that I read that book, and when I was, unpacking it for my own book, I think it did give me a deeper insight into the psychology of these emotions that we have historically perpetually always considered monstrous, and they're really
Hmm.
not. So, yeah, hopefully it's making me a better writer. It made me a better reader.
That's hey, any improvement is
Yeah,
good.
yeah. So that is my book. I don't know if you have anything else you wanna add to that, Oscar?
I think the only thing I want to add is like if you haven't read it, just go and get it. Like get it from the library, get it on the bookstore. I mean, I got it from the library. This copy that I have here that I was showing, it's not only like it actually has some really cool illustrations. Like it's again, it's a kid's book, right? But it has all this really cool art inside. So, and I got this from the library, from the public library. I'm gonna buy it because I want to have it in my bookshelf. But it's something that anyone like look at this art. Like this art is amazing. I know people who are listening to the podcast cannot see the art, so with more reason you need to go and get this book so you can see
Yeah,
the
you need
art.
to get that
It's
edition, because my edition is like this flimsy paperback edition that I've actually marked up because I was doing research for my own book. So I'm gonna go and buy that edition.
this one is it's a really good edition. Like, again, I got it from the library,
Yeah, yeah,
and I think it's one of those books that you want to have in. I say you like well, at least I want to
yeah.
have it in my bookshelf.
Is this one that you're gonna go back and read?
Absolutely.
I
And
love
if
it.
not, then someone's gonna come. I'm gonna be reminded of this book. I'm gonna force this person to read it by gifting it to them. So
Yeah.
it's always
I
good
feel
to
like
have books that you can gift out.
then this one is like a gift in a big hug with a box of Kleenex. It's like, "Here you go. I love you. I'm giving you a monster calls because I know
Yeah,
you need it right now."
yeah,
Yeah. Well, that's my book.
that's
How about
awesome.
you? How about
So
you, Rob?
I picked a very different type of book. I picked Leviathan Wakes over
Yes.
here, which is it's the first instance out of 9 books so far. It's
Who's the author?
so it's James S. A. Corey,
Right,
but it's actually 2 authors. Like this is the name that they picked. It's Dane actually wrote here. Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank are the authors. They co-write the series,
right.
and they have 9 books already. This is the first one, and I picked this one in particular because I actually watched this TV show first,
Which is
and
The
which is The
Expanse?
Expanse. It's called The
Right.
Expanse. It's on Amazon Prime, and I watched it and I loved it.
Mhm,
And then I found that there were books there, so I just got the book and just read it. It's actually the TV show is done pretty well. We're going to talk about it maybe a little bit later, but I think
mhm.
what I want to mention is that if you haven't seen the TV show or haven't read the books, it's basically a sci-fi novel. It's in the in outer spaces in the future when like humanity has colonized the solar
Right,
system, and it's now divided into 3 major factions. You have the Earth, which is kind of like the still the like the bastion of culture and those things for humanity. Then you have
mhm,
Mars, which is it's a superpower, like a military superpower, and you have the Belt, which is everything else, like the asteroid belts, where you have these colonies, like smaller colonies, where just gathering resources and gathering minerals and all that.
mhm,
Um, and I think there were so many things that I liked. Like first of all, the book is written in 2 perspectives. You have the 2 main characters, which is James Holden,
mhm,
which is the one who has the Rocinante crew, which is
mhm.
Rocinante is the spaceship, and on the other hand, you have Detective Miller, who is kind of like working on his own, trying to solve a crime.
Mhm.
But both of them, you start seeing the story from both angles, and they don't meet until later in the book. But like in the way that it's done, it actually shows a world like I've mentioned before. I love world building. I love massive worlds that exist, and I think there were so many things that I love. Like first of all, you have these 3 factions. There's a lot of political tension there. Um, you have Mars trying to like kind of dominate everything with their military power. You have the Earth trying to do the same thing, but more like we come from the Earth, like humanity comes from
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
And then the Belt is kind of like on the side. It's like mostly colonies, and like they're just extracting their resources. And well, sounds
They're like
familiar.
miner workers too, right? They're it's very much a caste
Yeah,
system.
it's a completely
Yeah,
caste system, and I
yeah,
actually like that a lot. Like the way it's defined, like it's uh it's a world that it's completely believable. Like
yeah,
I do believe that if at some point humanity reaches that point, the same things that we suffer here on Earth, like colonization, like having all this, like like superpower, like military powers and cultural powers in our world, and then you have all these other colonies that are just mostly are poor colonies, and they're
mhm,
just used to extract their natural resources. I think if humanity goes to that level, like these ideas are going to continue,
yeah,
and that's one of the things that I love. Like it's not only I think the characters are really well done, but I think what grabbed me here, the plot is pretty good as well. Like they're
mhm,
looking for there's some kind of like alien threat that's called a protomolecule, which is pretty cool. But I think what actually grabbed me was the extent of the world and how everything interacts with each other, like economy wise, political
yeah,
wise, all those things. So it it made me think on like on so many like massive worlds that we know in fantasy, but this is being replicated in a sci-fi, um, yeah, in a sci-fi environment, I would say, like in the future with all this technology, and you still making a massive, cohesive, um, concise world that
Yeah.
makes total sense.
It does make sense. Yeah, and like what you were saying, it's cohesive, every aspect. So I watched the first couple of episodes of The Expanse. Haven't read the book, but what I noticed is that every single detail is as a result of something else in the world. So you have, what are they? The belters. They're the ones
Yeah,
who
the
end up
Belters.
becoming very tall and spindly and very unhealthy. But then that means that they actually can't live on Earth because Earth's gravity is too heavy.
Right.
And then we have even more of a disparity between the caste system, like the different classes. So I thought that was really well done. It like you said, the word is cohesive. It
Yeah.
all works together, and that's the kind of world building that blows my mind that you are capable of doing. You are so capable of doing that.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know if I'm capable of doing something like this, but I get really inspired when I read
Yeah.
this type of things. I find that this is like this 9 books is one story, but the world is so massive that you can't just build any type of stories. Like, and I
Yeah.
like those, and I like when I'm reading something, I like feeling that the world where I'm living this story can host more stories there. And I
Yeah.
think that's what I really enjoyed about this one.
So what are you taking from this book? Because I know that you're writing a sci-fi book right now. So what are you able to take from this book or the writing style or the world building into your own practice?
You're gonna find this funny, but before I even watched the first episode, read the first book, like in my world, there was a section outside a city. Like the city was there, and there was like a belt outside, and
Yeah.
I used to call people there belters.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and now that belters are actually the people from the Expanse, I need to change the name.
You have to
But
change that.
it's funny. But like going back to what you asked, like the what I'm writing is a little bit different. Like it's more like I think mine is more like a dystopia type of thing, like a
Right.
cyberpunkish style. We don't like in what I'm writing. We don't go into the outer space or anything like that. But it's in the future. Like it's more like I'm trying to think of how would the world look like if we don't fix the problems we have today. That's kind of
Yeah.
my what I'm trying to do. Um,
Yeah.
but again, like this book actually gave me some ideas. Like talking about the world building that we have, like there's so many political tension happening between the three factions that it's something that I haven't even thought about putting into my writing until I read this. Because even though I read like the Song of Ice and Fire, well, at least the 5 that are out, and there's so much political tension there, I never thought about putting it into a sci-fi type of thing. Like,
Yeah. So we can do this. There's all kinds of speculative fiction. That's basically what it is. We're speculating about what could happen given certain situations. And because we have access to, futuristic technologies or magic or monsters or whatever the case may be, we can test out these scenarios that we can see possibly happening in our world and see how it's like, what is it, like a simulator.
yeah,
Right? I feel like, particularly with dystopian or sci-fi, it is a simulator of what is the worst case scenario. Or, hopefully what is the best case scenario.
the
But
best
then
case scenario that would be
I
that'd be
feel
ideal.
that would be ideal, but I feel like you wouldn't have a novel with that because you need to have
Now,
tension and conflict. But, like I know you know what I'm talking about with this.
when you're writing a story, you need
Yeah.
conflict, right? And if the conflict is just worse, then the better, from my point of view. And again, I love dystopians, dystopian futures. Like since I was a kid, I remember like watching Blade Runner,
Yeah.
and even it wasn't the director's cut. It was the old one where you had like the voiceover, like, "Oh, I was sitting in my car," and I still loved it. I still love the world that was created with Blade Runner. So if it's something like that, if it's something that's
Yeah.
going wrong, then you got me. Like I'm gonna read it, and yeah, I'm gonna consume it, and maybe like it, maybe not, but I'm gonna read it for sure.
I feel like the bigger the world you have, the bigger the problems that you need to write into it.
Yeah,
Like you like, and of course with this, the book that you're reading, it's like you have multiple worlds. You have Mars, you have Earth, you have the moon, I think, you have the Belters. So,
Yep.
I mean, and of course, like there's this alien threat presence sort of lingering in the periphery.
Proto-molecules. Yeah.
In molecules, you're gonna have to have like there's gonna be big problems
Oh
happening.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I know you only watched a few episodes, but if you
Yeah.
continue and at least finish the TV show,
Okay.
it just gets better. Honestly,
Yeah.
like it's
That's what I've heard.
such a good series, and
Yeah.
the books are, from my point of view, are better because you're reading the story from only two points of view, and
Yeah.
you actually get into their minds, and it's pretty cool. It's really well done. Like these two guys, like Daniel Abraham and Ty Frank, they're doing a great job.
It's
Um, yeah,
bananas.
it's amazing, and
Yeah.
it's, I think, the book nine
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
just came out.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
did it? Just
yeah, it
recently?
just did. Yeah, I
Oh,
mean, I
wow.
still need to catch up. Like, I still need to read
Yeah.
a lot, but it just came out, so it's. I think that's the last one. Okay, well, that's my book. I think we really do. I really enjoy this deep
Yes.
dive. I like to discuss books, especially when we
Yeah.
both read them and when they actually matter for, like, not matter, but when they actually have some impact in the things we're writing.
Yeah. I mean, what so I can't I'm thinking of a stat here, a quote or something. Was it 80% or 70% of writing is reading? Right, and you have
Yeah,
to read, and you have to be a critical reader, read all different types of, if you're reading fantasy, to read different types of fantasy, different authors, different, backgrounds, that sort of thing, in order to make you a better writer. And this is what we're
yeah,
trying to do here with these two book deep dive, because
yeah.
these are the books that impact us the most and impact us in our writing,
Hmm.
right? So we
Yeah,
want to be able to give that to you.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So what's it? It's 80% of the, how was it? Like,
I don't know. I feel like I totally just pulled that out of thin air, but I think it's like 70% or 80%. I'm making up stats
yeah,
just
you
so
know
we're
what? It's okay. Like 93% of stats are made up.
that's true. That is true, but I believe it anyways. But still, the sentiment rests.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
it's true. Like, yeah, even if you're writing one book, you're gonna read like 100 while
Oh
you're writing
god,
them.
yeah.
So
Yeah, you have to.
yeah,
And once you become a writer, once you really start entrenching yourself into the writing world, it kind of screws you for reading, because then you're always reading as a writer and you can't just sit back and enjoy a book, because then you start thinking about the
yeah,
structure and the characters and
yeah.
so
And you start
it's
taking notes, and you
ah,
and I don't know if it happens to you, but it happens to me even with like movies and TV shows. Like, I'm
oh
watching,
yeah.
it's like I need a notebook, and I was like, yeah, exactly. Okay, so I think we're done for today.
Yeah.
I hope everybody enjoyed our conversation. And again, like, there's going to be links to the books in the
Yes.
description, so you can take a look. Uh, if you can buy it, that's awesome. If not, especially if you're in a city like ours, like Toronto, you have an amazing public library system.
Yes.
Just go and get it from there.
Yeah.
It's there. You might have to wait because these two are actually in high
Popular.
demand, so you might actually have to wait. If you don't want to wait, just go and get them. Like, it's actually, it's worth it. The I
Yeah.
don't remember how much they cost, but it's worth
I
it.
don't think a Monster Calls is that expensive, to be honest. What, 12.99 Canadian, 9.99 US here for my copy. But
Yeah,
just so you know that if you do put holds in your library, the more holds, the more likelihood that your library will then acquire more copies, and that is good for writers.
right.
So do it.
It's good for
Yeah.
writers. It's good for readers because you can have more options. It's good for everybody.
Yeah, it's good for the libraries, and we
Yeah,
need our libraries.
we
Shout out
do.
to TPL, Toronto Public Library.
Totally. Okay, well, thank you very much for staying with us until the end of the
Yes.
episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe to your podcast, and make sure that you get all the downloads as soon as they come out. We do
Yes.
this podcast every Tuesday, so
Yes.
see you back in a week.
Yeah, and follow us on Instagram. Don't forget about our Instagram at Why We Write Fantasy. Handle Why We Write Fantasy. Yes.
Yeah,
I cut it there.
and use the hashtag.
And use the hashtag, yes. And the hashtag WWWF, hashtag Why We Write Fantasy, and hashtag Why We Write Fantasy Podcast. We are following those hashtags. We want to see you there.
Perfect. Well, thanks everybody, and happy writing.